I'm Keith Thomas for Tahoe Trucking Media. Welcome to the Grocery Outlet Bargain Market pregame show with head coach Josh Ivins. Welcome, Coach.
Thanks, Keith.
Always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. It was an interesting game last week. Started kind of slow against the Spring Creek Spartans. It was went up 14-0, and then I think it was 14-0 at halftime, if I remember. Mm-hmm. And then all heck broke loose, as they say, in the second half. And Truckee did what Truckee's been doing all year long. But the Spartans, I mean, they put up a pretty good fight in the first half. And what was your assessment of the game? I mean, again, all three phases. Well, I'm changing it to all four phases of the game because it's offense, defense, special teams, and coaching.
That's fair.
So your assessment of last week's game?
Well, you said it was a slow start. I mean, we had a couple drives there we stalled out on early in the first half, just with some things I was trying that we've been working on in practice, and it didn't pan out very well, so we stalled out. But Spring Creek's a good team. They're huge up front. They're big. Like, their tackles are big.
They got some players.
And they're young, so they're going to get better every week because they're youth. They're playing their youth. So years that I've had to play sophomores, you get better each week with those teams because the sophomores, they grow pretty quick. They also got Joel Junn back on their staff as a offensive consultant. So, I mean, he's up in the booth, and having him, I think, on staff is a good choice by the head coach, and he does a good job of helping them prepare. And they had 2 weeks to prepare for us. They had a bye the week before, and we've been through some battles, and you put all that together, and you got a pretty rested 2-week planned Spring Creek team coming in to surprise, and we're coming off of the win against St. Vincent, which was a pretty big win for us, and we were in a game, and it was good for us to be in a game, and I think Spring Creek did a good job, and we stalled out down in the 5. In hindsight probably should have kicked, but at the same time was thinking our defense would give us the ball back fairly quickly, and then Spring Creek went on a nice drive of their own, and it really could have been 14-7 at halftime. So. They dropped a pass in the end zone, which I'm sure they're reviewing and other teams are talking about, and it could have been 14-7 at halftime. Different game, but ultimately we came out right away in the second half and scored and kind of somewhat jumped out in front. I mean, they still hung in there and had a couple drives, but assessment, proud of our kids. I think we showed a lot of fight once again, and what we're capable of. It's just being consistent. With things offensively and defensively.
Well, you couldn't really ask for a better start to the season. I write the team preview, as you know. You've asked me to do it for the last few years. And last year, the question mark was at quarterback, obviously, in the 2023 season. And that question was answered with an exclamation point. This year, in my preview, the question was the defense, because we lost so much on defense. But the defense has stepped up so much this year. I have been super impressed with what the defense has done this year.
Me too. And, I'm not surprised by that because I've seen these guys working since January, but it still has to come through fruition on the field. And Coach Healy he does an exceptional job of preparing the defense for each week and each opponent. But also in the preseason and in spring ball and through the summer and all the different things that we've done that have gotten us to this moment. I mean, we did a 7-on-7 at Fresno State. We did a 7-on-7 in San Jose State. We were playing top competition in California at these 7-on-7s.
Yeah.
Like, we played Pittsburgh. We didn't fare too well against them, but I mean, we've seen like the top athletes in
you
California.
went against Pittsburgh?
Yes.
Okay, because I think, if I'm not mistaken, Damani Ranch or
Minogue.
Oh, Minogue. Excuse me. That's what I meant to say.
It was a 7-on-7, so it's a completely different animal. But
I
we've
get
seen,
that.
what I'm saying is my players have been around
Yeah.
some great athletes and
Right.
competed against great athletes up at Oregon's camp.
Right.
And so we feel like going into this season, we're pretty prepared for, Damani Ranch, who has athletes that we've seen. We've seen athletes like that, you
Right.
know, and same with St. Vincent. So we're not surprised by the athleticism of teams. It will be, to me, going forward is, you had these three California pretty tough opponents, but they don't know the history of Truckee, and they don't have as much film and experience against us. So now you have coaching staffs that they're more familiar with us, and their players are familiar with our players.
Right.
And we see these guys at track meets, and some of them play baseball against each other and stuff.
Right.
And you don't get that when you're playing teams that you don't normally face, but we play these teams every year. So you have to factor that in, and just the little edge that they might have to beat us.
Yeah. So let's talk about tonight's game. We're on the road at Fernley, and it's a turf surface. We've had weather this week. You actually moved up practice midweek to avoid the thunderstorm, so you could get practice in. So because anytime there's lightning on the field, you have to take everybody off the field for 30 minutes and make sure until the next thunder. So this week practicing in the rain, and I'm not sure what the weather's going to be on tonight. I think it's supposed to clear up by tonight, but you're on the turf. And talk a little bit about the difference between being on grass and on turf. And are you going to get any practice in, or did you get any practice in this week on turf?
I was thinking about that at practice and was like, man, I probably should have contacted Mrs. Larson over at the Alder Creek Middle School to try to get on their turf field, but I didn't. I think running against the option on grass versus turf, there's a big difference in the speed of it, and that's going to be something we have to adjust to in the first quarter. We don't play on a lot of turf, but we're going back-to-back weeks here because Fallon replaced their grass with turf as well. But the good thing is we did play at Union Mine. We have good team speed. So does Fernley. So it should be a fast, fun game to watch, I think, for the fans. Hopefully we match up with their speed and we can control their offense because it looks pretty explosive. Yeah. And we can do the same things that we've been doing on offense, which is make big plays.
Well, last week Fernley played Elko, and they was at Fernley, and Fernley put up 31 points on the board, and normally that would be a pretty good score. But unfortunately for Fernley, Elko put up 64 points on the board. Nearly 100 points in that game. What did you see on film?
Well, I saw a pretty good Elko team and, some athletes and capabilities of Fernley too. So Fernley did give up 2 scores on special teams, but that struggled to contain Elko's offense. They got a pretty good running back. Their quarterback's mobile, kind of like Jace. And, Coach Sellers has them rolling. That's what I saw. And Fernley as well. They made some mistakes. Otherwise, Elko doesn't pull away as fast as they did in the second half.
So we've got Elko next month, October 11th, I believe it is. But we're at Fernley tonight. Who are the players we're going to be watching for Fernley that Truckee's going to be trying to contain?
Well, I think number one is their quarterback, Bryce Stevens. He's the basketball player. Really good athlete. He can throw and run. He's a
So number 3, Bryce Stevens.
Yeah, I think number 22. He's one of the top running backs. Keyshawn Love.
Which one?
Get a lot. Keyshawn Love, number 22.
22.
Yeah, and number 2. He was 8 last year, but number 2.
Yeah.
Riley
McCullough.
He's
That's the coach's son.
Yeah, it's the defensive coordinator's son. Keyshawn and Riley both are going to be in their 3-year varsity starter.
Yeah.
And they're just juniors. So they were pulled up as freshman players. They're very experienced at the varsity level. This is a team that they got good experience. They've got good athleticism. And they run a pretty physical offense. So if we can be physical and get in the right spots, I think we can give them some trouble.
Yeah. I watched the huddle highlights on Max Preps. Max Preps puts together these little highlight films, and you can watch them on Truckee as well. But they don't really get all of the game film that you guys get to see. So I did notice that 22 Love and 3 Stevens and number 2 McCullough. What is their offensive scheme?
Well, they run the flex bone option, triple option.
Yeah.
And you have to be really sound with your assignments and go about doing your job and only your job and not trying to do someone else's job, or that's when you see big plays in the triple option.
Yeah.
They're throwing the ball more this season with Bryce Stevens, and they've made some big plays downfield with the pass game, both against Elko and quite a bit against Worcester. I did watch the Bishop Fernley game too, and Bishop did a much better job of containing their athletes and just brought a certain level of physicality that we hope we can bring as well.
They normally have some pretty big guys. They don't look quite as big this year as in previous years. But talk a little bit about the history of Truckee and Fernley, because Fernley's had Truckee's number a few times in crucial games late in the season, and I'm sure that you want to make sure that doesn't happen in tonight's game.
I mean, the history versus Truckee and Fernley goes quite a ways back. No love lost between the two communities, by the way, but we respect what they do out there, and I know Coach Ward pretty well. He's a good guy. He's since retired. I don't know if he's still on their staff coaching, but
right.
He retired from teaching last year, and good guy. I mean, he came in and visited me during the winter when we first got our weight room and checked it out and stuff. So he's aware of what we're doing here. But as far as the recent history between the schools, I mean, we've had some playoff matchups. And most
specifically in 21.
Well, I mean, you can go back to 2017. I mean, we're 40 seconds away from winning a league championship in the North in 2017 when Marcus was a junior, and they drive down in 35 seconds and score a touchdown, and we went from like 1 seed to 4 seed right there, and we had to go back out there. After hosting in 2017, we ended up beating South Tahoe in the playoffs and then going back out there, and we lost another close game to them. And they didn't go to state. They lost to Mojave the next year, but a couple years later, they had some players on that team that were eventually on their 2019 team that won state, and they destroyed us in game 1. And then we came back out there in 2019 and gave them a run for their money. We lost 35-28, but we made it close. They eventually go on to win it. COVID happens. We don't play, and the league change. So we don't play Fernley at their house. I mean, the last time we played them at their house was 2019 in that playoff game.
Wow.
So it's been that long. And then the 21 game where, we certainly had our opportunity to close that game out. They got a big special teams play.
Came up 1 foot short.
Well, I mean, no, it goes back to being up a couple scores in the fourth quarter with like 6 minutes left, and we kick off to them, and they take it to the house. And that was a huge momentum shift, and then they kick an onside kick, and we don't get it, and they drive down, and then all of a sudden, they're right in it or took the lead at that point. We throw a pick, they score again, and we went so fast, we lost the game in like 4 minutes. And then we came back down and ended up scoring and going for 2 and not getting it. But so people can say like, the call to go for 2 and we came up short was the game decider. But to me, it was a few athletes that decided to take a kickoff off and took themselves out of off the field, literally, and putting backups in on kickoff.
I wasn't aware of that. But I was aware of the
you're aware of it
kickoff
now.
Return. But
we made some mistakes, and we've since fixed that with some stuff like culture-wise. But that hurt us, man. Not having our starting kickoff team. Everyone was thinking, 6 minutes left. We're up 2. We got this, and tapping out of the kickoff ultimately, to me, turned that game around. And and also Fernley executed, right? Fernley's a good team. They got athletes. They executed as well as they needed to during that period of time, and we did not.
Yeah.
Our players, when things flipped and the momentum flipped, were not able to respond well to that adversity. And those are some things that we have fixed since.
Lessons learned. Well,
Yes.
and as you and Coach Schaefer have said, you either win or you learn. And that's one of those things. The game's not over until the clock goes to 0-0-0. I didn't realize
There was a lot of
all
learning
that.
that night.
Pardon me?
There was a lot of learning that night. And,
Yeah.
and unfortunately for that senior group, their season ended that night, and it didn't need to.
Yeah.
But it did. And, we've moved on, and, I feel for that group because they've come back and they were at the Fernley game last year, all amped up about it because that was the game that, they remember, right? And it hurt. And,
Well, I really appreciate you sharing that story with us because I didn't know that story, all the details of it, the backstory of it. And we've talked about, the history between Truckee and various teams. And you always say, well, it's a different team now. It's a different, it's 4 years ago, it's 6 years ago, whatever. But there's still in the back of our minds, because you've been involved in for way longer than I have. This is my 21st year involvement with Truckee football. But there's still that thing in your back of your mind where you don't want to let that kind of thing happen again. And you have to get that across to the current crop of athletes.
Yes, and they're aware of the history. They're aware of things that have transpired. I have a player actually that was on that team on the sideline when we lost that playoff game. Yeah. Colby Jitloff was brought up as a freshman. Yeah. He was on that team. He saw it. We've talked about it. And then just reminding them of what happened in 2012, and what could happen if you let your guard down. And our guard's not down. We know that Fernley has a pretty good group of athletes, and they're well coached, and they got a good system that works for them. So we're certainly not overlooking Fernley at all. We're going to go out there. We're walking into their hometown, a pretty
it's going to be a packed house.
And
it's going to be a packed house tonight in Fernley. And for those of you that don't know what happened in 2012, it was a 41-game win streak, and I had been involved since 2010 doing the broadcast for Truckee football, and all of a sudden, my color man, Big Bri, and I, we're in a game where every broadcast was a win for 2.5 years, and it's 0-0 with 3 minutes to go in the game, and Fernley scores, and it's 7-0, and Truckee tries to come back and score. It was our first losing broadcast, so we learned a lot that day. If you don't win, you learn. Because we were dumbstruck. We didn't know what to say. But we're not going to let that happen tonight. We're going to have a great game, and it's going to be on the turf.
Hold on.
Okay.
Let me just emphasize all this because it can't come full circle. So the streak has been mentioned. Our kids are aware of what happened in 2012.
I didn't mention it tonight.
But the thing that is different is we learned from that. And our kids just have to trust that, and this is what we're about at this point, right? This is about how we prepare and how we do things on a daily basis.
Right.
Okay. We don't focus on this streak that's out there. Now, other teams probably are and using it potentially as motivation.
Right.
For us, it has to be what we need to do to win the game that's in front of us. Okay. And it's less about the streak, and it's more about if you lose a game now, then you're going to be on the outside of hosting playoffs. And that's what's on the line. It's not this streak and all this stuff. It's about we want to host throughout the playoffs. We would like Slam / or Mawapa to come up to us and us not have to go to them. In order to do that, we got to run the gauntlet of our league. And that is not an easy thing to do, and it's not going to be easy this year. And Fernley, Fallon, Elko, Lowry, they will all have something to say about that. And it looks like South Tahoe as well. So
South Tahoe,
there is not an easy game on our schedule.
Yeah.
And that benefits us because we know we have to go into every game the same way we go into every game so far throughout the past couple of years is that we have to operate at a high standard on a daily basis.
Well, the one thing that you said that you drove it home in our email conversations this week was, this week, Truckee has to go 1-0. And that's the streak we're looking at, 1-0.
Correct. You couldn't say it better, Keith.
Thanks very much, Coach.
You're welcome.
Always a pleasure. Great fortune tonight. We are in Fernley and facing the Vaqueros. Do not be fooled by their record of 1-3. They have faced some tough opponents, and they will always bring it, and they always will bring it against Truckee. For Dan Martin on the camera, Roy O'Farrell in the studio, I'm Keith Thomas for Tahoe Truckee Media. This has been the Grocery Outlet Bargain Market pregame show.
Wolverines.